Today on the LA Food Podcast, I'm your host, Lucas Servodio, but at this moment in time, you can consider me your full ride scholarship to a PhD level course on LA food history. Joining us today on the pod is Evan Lovett of LA in a Minute. You've probably seen Evan's face on your TikTok or Instagram feeds, dropping some serious knowledge on the City of Angels' wonderful and often wacky history. Whether he's answering the question of why Trader Joe's parking lots are always so damn small, or why people from LA say "the" before freeway numbers, Evan's passion for Los Angeles is the secret ingredient that makes his storytelling so special. Like a food crawl at Smorgasburg, our conversation on today's episode is pretty wide-ranging. We discuss topics like why so many fast food chains were born in Los Angeles, what the heck Jaleel White has to do with revolutionizing the LA food scene, and why the City of Angels is definitely in the conversation for best food city in the world. There are tales of FBI raids, East Coast versus West Coast hip-hop, and even murder. So if you're the type of person who finds themselves wondering, who the heck invented the smoothie? Or what's the oldest restaurant in LA? This is definitely the episode for you. Get your notepads out because there will be a pop quiz. And without further ado, let's chow down. Today, I am stoked to be joined by Mr. LA himself. It's TikToker, podcaster, LA historian, Evan Lovett from LA in a Minute and LA in a Minute podcast. Evan, how you doing today?
I'm doing awesome, man. Great to be here. Thank you so much. Pleased to be on the show.
Of course. Thank you so much for coming on. What are your LA stomping grounds? Where are you calling us from?
All right. So I am in Studio City, California, what I call the heart of Los Angeles. The proximity to everywhere is pretty nice from Studio City. You got all the freeways, easy hop over the canyon. And, you know, my old stomping grounds were also in the San Fernando Valley. It used to be called Sepulveda. Now it's the Hills. But I've lived in Westwood when I went to UCLA and spent time all over the city since I was a kid. And my dad was a boxing manager at 108th and Broadway in South LA. But yeah, we've always been going. I mean, the Forum in Inglewood. My parents love Venice. So they just showed me the way around LA, and I've been embracing it ever since.
Wait, he was a boxing manager? What does that mean? Like, did he coach the boxers, or he was like promoted the fights, or what?
So my dad was a boxing manager. His brother was the trainer. They had an organization called Jabs Boxing, Jabs. It was 4 guys. My dad was Stu. His brother was Art. The other guys were Jackson and Ben. Anyway, it became just the 2 of them, and they kept the Jabs Boxing manager. But they used to manage fighters, and, you know, not to go on a different topic, but we go to Vegas every month, and that's why Vegas kind of became my like second city. But yeah, he was a boxing manager at the Country Club in Reseda. Again, he was on, or his fighters were on cards at the Forum, but his biggest fighter was somebody named Mia St. John, one of the first big female boxers, and she ended up being in Don King's stable at the end of the day. But when she was on the way up, she was managed by my dad and trained by his brother, my uncle.
No way. Did you ever get in the ring yourself?
Dude, I am somebody who doesn't love the physical confrontation, let's say, you know what I mean? Even football, I'm more of a DB than wide receiver. I'd like to, you know, intercept, maybe hit, but not be hit. So boxing, one time I boxed, and it was just a bunch of my friends. You know, we had the headgear, the gloves, and I'm not a small guy. I'm a fairly big guy, fairly strong. But again, just no technique, just went in throwing roundhouses. And I went in against my buddy Tim, who's still a good friend to this day, and he knocked me silly. I didn't get knocked down, but after we fought, I think we only went even 3 rounds. I was like laid out for an hour plus. Legit, probably had a concussion. This is before the days when you're really diagnosing concussions, but in retrospect, it was absolutely a concussion. And that was the first and last time that I would have been in the ring.
That's good. You know, it's good to know your strengths and weaknesses in life.
I try.
Yeah, well, speaking of strengths, you've made a name for yourself as Mr. LA. You've really, you know, hit, I don't know about our listeners, but as far as my TikTok feed and my Instagram feed, I can't go like, you know, 5 scrolls without seeing your face going on about getting into some awesome part of LA. Tell us about LA in a Minute, what it is for those who don't know, and what inspired you to start this crazy journey?
All right, man. I've always loved Los Angeles, like exceptionally loved Los Angeles. I just had a crazy loyalty towards it. Going back to when I was a kid, I'd pay attention like what athletes went to what high schools and just always take note of that. Just some sort of LA pride. Again, like my parents were big LA people. My dad was born in Glendale. My mom was born in Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, but she came out here when she was 6. But they just embraced the city. I mean, again, Griffith Park, Dodger Stadium, perfect example. So my dad, we'd go to Dodger games. We'd go to like one game every homestand. He'd always take a different route to Dodger Stadium. We're always coming from the same place, our house. But he was just like, look, you could take Sunset. Look, you could take Stadium Way. Like, look, you drive through Angelino Heights. And, you know, as a kid, you don't like reel out. You're like, let's just get to the game. But I think that sort of in retrospect is like, wow, he really loved Los Angeles and loved to see it. And that's something that even my wife and I, when we were dating, one of our favorite ways to just spend time together is driving around Los Angeles, just seeing the different neighborhoods, seeing the different areas. When I applied for college, I only applied to UCLA and USC. I knew I wanted to stay in LA. And then, so as far as LA in a minute, the love of LA has always been there. I always read books about Los Angeles. I'm still a subscriber to the LA Times newspaper. And my kid was 8 years old. And I was like, it's time for you to start paying attention to news. Now, you can imagine what a kid's going to do with a newspaper. My peers don't even like newspapers anymore. So I was like, dude, he's all up on the screen all the time. He's got to get quality content. There is not a lot of quality content out there. We were around my wife's cousins for, Christmas. And they were like, the younger cousins, they're like, we get our news from TikTok. Like, you're a big news guy. And I was like, this sounds terrible. Facebook news, like, ruin the world. TikTok's going to be way worse. It's just shit. And they were showing me like New York Times, Washington Post. I'm like, all right, at least you're getting news somewhere. That's cool. So the new year, 2022, I've always been like a creative guy with an outlet. I've had like blogs before. I used to be a sports writer. I wrote for the LA Times doing sports in like early 2000s, but I didn't have a creative outlet at the time, like especially during pandemic and coming out of pandemic. And I was like, you know what? Maybe I should do LA news on TikTok. So I started with the actual newspaper, and I'd be like, these are like 2 stories that happened in LA yesterday. And TikTok algorithm's pretty good. I got like 1,000 followers in 2 weeks. I thought that was great. I'd been on Twitter for 12 years and had like 900 followers. I'm like, this is great. TikTok, 1,000 followers. And news is not exciting every day. And I don't want to talk about like political meetings and blah, blah, blah. So one day I'd been reading this book called like Restaurants in California Landmark Restaurants. George Geary's the author. He's had like 3 different books on LA and California restaurants. I was reading that book and I noticed all these fast food places come from LA. So I was like, I'm going to do the 10 oldest fast food chains that originated in LA. That one kind of went quote unquote viral. And then from there, I'm like, dude, this is what people want. I've always been told LA has no culture and history. All you need to do is to look. And then so from that point forward, I'm like, history of Sepulveda Boulevard, history of the 405 freeway, LA River. I never knew that the LA River was a river. I grew up 4 blocks from it. We always called it the Wash. I didn't even know it was LA River, but that's the lifeblood of the city. So that, and of course, the restaurant ones and the food ones are the ones people love. And I just kept making those. And lo and behold, 16, 17 months later, here we are. And it's been like a pretty good ride and a pretty good product, hopefully, that people will enjoy.
Yeah, I'd say so. I think it's awesome that the first one that took off was food. And you know what? That makes sense on TikTok. Food content is huge. I'm curious, just like, what you would say when people would tell you Los Angeles has no culture. Like, how would you respond to that? He's got a big smirk on his face.
Very, very good question. Because there's a meme by this guy named Memo Torres of LA Taco. It was one of the most profound things about Los Angeles I've seen, where he's like, and he just, all it is a map, and he just circles the map, Beverly Hills, Hollywood, Santa Monica. And he's like, this is the area people think is Los Angeles. But then you see like LA, especially county, you're like, holy shit, that's such a small part of it. But this is why people think LA doesn't have culture, because when they're thinking of LA, it's always like the movies and the celebrities and plastic surgery. And like, that's what LA, and even the beach is amazing. And it's, incredible part of Los Angeles, but like the culture, no, you got to think of like the rich, like fabric of the people of Los Angeles. Los Angeles has more quote unquote minorities than white people, and all these communities that have all these great diversity and great food. And like, that's what makes Los Angeles. All you got to do is look for it. And here's the funny thing. Los Angeles has always been, it's had a short history, right? Like essentially 1870, 1880s when it like took off. It was an officially in 1851. And that's a short time in the history of the world. And LA has always been the city of the future. So we have always kind of like just demolished. And you see it now with nice homes. All these, Betty White's home was just demolished. You know what I mean? But that's been the history of LA, where people are like, oh, it's old. Cool. Let's fucking demolish it. And it's funny. You see a restaurant that's 50 years old. And you're like, oh my God, a 50-year-old restaurant. Whereas in the rest of the world, you know, you have places that are hundreds of years old. You know what I mean? So a fair assessment, but all you got to do is look for it. And that's kind of my mission is to be like, I'm curious. So I want to stop and see what is the story behind this. And there always is such a good and fascinating, colorful story in LA.
Yeah, we're going to get to the food in a minute. But what's so interesting about that to me is you're someone who's lived here their whole lives. You're so proud of LA and you feel that way. For a lot of people, LA is a place they come to do something. You know, they come to like pursue a dream. They come to, you know, become an actor, become a star, do a job or something. They don't really think of it as a place to put down roots that has a history of its own, you know? And I think it must be a real culture shock when they hear someone like you knock on their door and be like, hey, actually, there's a lot more here than it looks like.
I'll tell you what, it's 51% of the people in Los Angeles were not born in Los Angeles, to your point. And that number is actually lower than it's ever been. It was funny. I did an episode where going back to like by a decade. At one point in 1920, 86% of the people in Los Angeles were born somewhere else. So it is a history of transplants. And you're right. People are coming here either to achieve something or to escape something. But you put down roots and you have more and more native people, or more and more people are born in Los Angeles. And you know, as far as somewhere to like not focus on the culture, well, we're at the point where LA is starting to celebrate it and embrace it. So I think that just bringing attention to it makes people realize you're like, wow, this place really does have like a cool and fun history with a great background, a lot of good stories.
Speaking of history and culture, you do a lot of food stories. You know, you got a whole playlist on TikTok of food stories where you're covering, you know, the classic restaurants or the fast food brands, to your point. You know, what's so interesting is I feel like what makes TikTok food stories typically so interesting is you get to see the people eating them, but you're not doing that. You're doing something a little different. How do you approach food stories?
That's a good point, man, because I've become friends with some good food creators, and I've been approached by restaurants, chefs, things like that. And it is funny because if somebody wants to collaborate or do an episode, they're always like, yeah, and this dish and this food. And I'm like, well, I'm looking for the story. I'm looking for the histories, right? So I started out just kind of building on that oldest restaurants theme, like, because again, to me, I was always kind of a fast food junkie, right? Growing up, dude, till today, truthfully, thank you, my wife, for not allowing me to eat as much fast food as I probably would.
What are we talking here? Are we talking like the good stuff, like In-N-Out, or really just whatever?
All of them. I love it all. McDonald's, Taco Bell, Carl's, of course, In-N-Out, Fat Burger, things like that, Panda Express. But here's where it hits me. I'm like, these all come from LA. And you think of, oh, McDonald's, it's crappy and it's this corporate giant. But the story is so badass. Like, for me, this McDonald's story, everybody's like, if they know, you're like, where did McDonald's start? They're like, oh, San Bernardino. They even got that museum out there. No, McDonald's started as a place called the Airdrome at the Monrovia Airport in the late 1930s. It was Patrick McDonald, the McDonald brothers' father, had this octagonal building, right? And it was in the tiny little building in the airport. And his main product was orange juice, because oranges came to define Los Angeles. And that agriculture is one of the big reasons why LA developed as it did. Is it was an orange town, it was an agriculture town. But refrigeration hadn't really been invented, so people were squeezing fresh orange juice. He was out in Monrovia, where all the orchards are, you know, Redlands and all that kind of stuff. Inland Empire or what became the Inland Empire. So he's serving orange juice. And oh, by the way, he also had burgers and hot dogs and fries and stuff like that. But his sons were like, dude, what are you doing here at the airport? There's this thing called Route 66. let's open there. Let's open this aerodrome there. And he's like, I want to get out of the business, this restaurant business for me. They're like, yo, but that octagonal building is pretty badass. They took the building. They moved the building with this help. I'm about to go on a big tangent for you, but I'll get to it. They moved with the help of this guy, Neil Baker. Remember that name. So Neil Baker was this contractor and brick maker, by the way, and he helped move the building. He moved it to Route 66, where the McDonald's brothers were inspired, and they opened a new restaurant called McDonald's Barbecue. So McDonald's Barbecue used to serve 29 different things, right? Like barbecue ribs, like barbecue chicken. Oh, yeah, they still had hamburgers. Oh, they picked up these milkshake machines and fries. But for 6 years, they were successful because people liked the shakes and the fries, and they were eating the barbecue, but the barbecue was time-consuming and it was expensive. So they shut down for a year, dropped the barbecue part of it, focused on the fries and the burgers and the milkshakes, and that became McDonald's. So everybody knows the Ray Kroc story and the founder story and all that, and that's great. But the heart of it comes from Los Angeles, and it started in LA. And that's why when I see McDonald's, I'm like, hell yeah, I'll have a quarter pounder and fries and put fries on my burger. McDonald's represent that came from Los Angeles. But real quick, Neil Baker comes up huge in the history of fast food. He was responsible directly or indirectly for Taco Bell, Wiener Schnitzel, Del Taco, who all came from his lineage, and we can get into that. But he had a hand in the opening of all of those franchises, and they all come from LA. So, like, again, how do I approach a food story? I find an awesome story, and I just feel, I'm like, why doesn't I used to text my friends, right? Another one is like Denny's. You don't think about Denny's. I used to go there, late night. It was the only place open in certain areas when you were growing up. But Denny's started as Danny's Donuts. And I remember texting my friends. It was funny. The December before I started LA in a Minute, December 2021, I found that out. And I was like, dude, did you check this out? Denny's was actually Denny's. Some people care. Some people don't. Some people are like, who cares? And I'm like, this is so fascinating because this is a donut store that ended up having over 10,000 locations as an all-night diner. So going back to eating the food, of course I love eating the food. It's not a main part of the story. In context, I will usually eat something like in the closing shot. Yeah. Again, people want to see, like, again, example, the origin story of Taco Bell. I won't get into full depth, but it was Bell's Burgers. Glenn Bell, who also was put on by Neil Baker, had a place called Bell's Burgers, also in Santa Barbara, San Bernardino. Across the street was Meatloaf Cafe, a Mexican place, and they had a line around the block. He's like, what's the line for? They have these things called tacos dorados, hard shell tacos. He was like, yo, I can Americanize that, make those for the American palate. And lo and behold, he changed from Bell's Burgers to Taco Bell. But like, all these stories are intriguing. In that episode, I happen to like take a bite, crunch, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, I approach them from a historical perspective, except for one episode, which was close to my heart, which is Pioneer Chicken, which you haven't been in LA long enough, but in the 1980s, there was no bigger fried chicken place in Los Angeles than Pioneer Chicken. They had 200 plus locations in the LA area, and their fried chicken was like this orange shade. They used I'm not like a food guy in that context, but I forget if it's dry rub or wet rub, but it's different than what like the normal fried chicken is. And for whatever reason, the spices comes out orange, and it's this huge crunch, right? And my dad used to take me, and then they all disappeared. I remember it wasn't even disappearing slowly. They like all turned into Popeyes and disappeared. Nobody thought about it. I found out that there's two left, one in Bell Gardens, one in Boyle Heights. I was like, dude, Pioneer still exists. Had to go out there, had to check out the chicken. And of course, I tell the history during the story, but like, yes, the chicken is so legit. And it was as I remembered. And that was
really,
like
the chicken still hits?
Dude, it's awesome, man. Because the guy, and then I've kind of become internet close with the guy who owns it, and he's like, dude, it was such an LA institution. And they are. I mean, you can check the history. They're the only two who are allowed to have the recipe, blah, blah, blah. So they stay true to the recipe. They stay true to the chicken. And now the son of the guy who owned it took over. And, the younger people are savvier on the internet. So he's doing more like internet style PR, modern day, social media and stuff like that. And Pioneer like is prime for a comeback, or so I hope. And I was hoping to kind of like help that along. So yeah,
that's awesome. That's really cool. I got to check that out. Pioneer Chicken. Did Popeyes buy it out, or so, like buy out the other locations? What happened? Why did it go away everywhere?
So this guy who started Pioneer Chicken, forget his name, something Kaufman, H.K. Kaufman, shrouded in mystery. I could only find one picture of the guy, and I'm like a research master. I'm pretty good at finding the pictures I need to find. Can only find one picture of this guy. Turns out that he took his Pioneer money because he's making loot. You have 300 locations, like you're making money. And he bought an entire city of Blue Jay. That town still exists. It's right near Arrowhead. He bought the city and he was going to turn it into like, his own personal paradise. You buy a city, that's a big deal. You open yourself up to all kinds of like audits and IRS stuff. Turns out that when the IRS did the audits, he was doing all kinds of things wrong, improprieties at Pioneer. The FBI came into all the Pioneers in a coordinated raid, took the registers, shut down business overnight. This is in the late 80s because this guy had so much IRS trouble and tax trouble. And he ended up getting some kind of like leniency, blah, 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 where like the Pioneers were still extant, but he needed to pay all this money. So he sold all of them, except for some reason, these two. And then Popeyes bought the majority of the Pioneer chickens and turned them into Popeyes.
Wow, that sounds like it could be an HBO series, like the story of Pioneer Chicken with the FBI and buying this town, Blue Jay. First of all the things you could buy, buying a town seems like a horrific idea if you've already got some shady business going on.
Well, I'll tell you what, there was another famous LA restaurateur who also bought a city, Juan Okura, who owns, well, he passed away recently, but he owned Juan Pollo. There's 30 like Juan Pollo restaurants, mostly in the Inland Empire, a couple bleed over into LA. But it's like kind of an El Pollo Loco style restaurant, like rotisserie chicken, really well regarded in the Inland Empire. But that dude ended up buying his own town also, which was a ghost town. The name of the town kind of escapes me right now. Amboy, California, it was called. And he ended up buying a town also. So I think it's one of those things where you're like, bro, the ego, at a certain point, your ego is like, I'm going to own a city and do blah, 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 blah. So I don't think it's a sound investment decision, but other factors are at play. Yeah.
They clearly were before the days of just buying your own private island or doing something sensible like that, right?
In the case of the Juan Pollo guy, in all fairness, he wanted to it was a ghost town. He wanted to make it like a museum. So he at least had an idea for it, but it seems like Kaufman may not have been the most savory character around. So who knows what his ultimate game plan was.
Well, these are some pretty wacky stories, but I don't even know if they would crack the top 10 of what you would consider wackiest. What would you say is your wackiest story you've covered for LA in a minute?
Well, I need the definition of wacky. Tell me what you mean as far, because like wacky can mean a lot of things, like crazy, unbelievable, silly. Like in what regard do you want wacky? Because there's here. I'll tell you this. How about Taco Bell launched? Speaking of barbecue, Taco Bell launched a barbecue brand at one point where there was Taco Bell barbecue restaurant. And that may not be wacky, but I was like, that's a weird crossover. Needless to say, 3 locations later, they found out people didn't want barbecue from Taco Bell. That didn't work. But I did a whole episode on that. McDonald's launched McDonald's Pizza for a while, and that was actually a real thing. That's an upcoming episode. That one hasn't aired yet. But McDonald's Pizza was a thing. And that fell flat because you can't make pizza as fast as people need their food inside like a fast food restaurant. And they had to change all their equipment. It just didn't work. So, I mean, like, I thought those are maybe like wacky ideas. But as far as like history, they all have cool, like weird backgrounds. And that's what makes this so ripe to continuing to do stories. Here's one for you. Tommy's original?
Yeah. I'll tell you a story, quick story about Tommy's before you tell me the real story. But Tommy's owner, I believe, is last name Arbach or something like that. And
absolutely.
My college professor was of the family, his Professor Arbach. And for our Christmas party at the like Office of Politics that I worked at USC, he would bring us to Tommy's. And we would do a burger eating competition because we had unlimited access to burgers. And I'm proud to announce that I was the winner of the 2013 Tommy's burger eating competition. I think I took down like 13 burgers, chili cheeseburgers. Needless to say, I didn't feel too great after, but
how many with buns?
All with buns, all chili cheeseburger, 13.
That's professional level. How'd you do that?
Honestly, just really wanting to beat the other guy. That's all that pushed me.
Did you do the water thing? Did you have any tricks?
No, I just self-hatred, fueled by self-hatred. I did it.
And you were in college?
I was just out of college. Yeah, 22, 23.
That era is the era you could do it. And by the way, going back, that era is my fast food peak because I would crush, not like that, but I would crush some. I was not a stranger to ordering 2 combo meals for the same meal at a restaurant. Let's put it that way. But it's funny you bring that up because my son, wife, and I just went to Fat Sal's this weekend. You ever heard of Fat Sal's?
Yeah, Westwood Classic.
Thank you for saying that. I went to UCLA, but I graduated when that place was known as $1.50s, where all their sandwiches were sold for $1.50. So that'll date me. But I only knew Fat Sal's as a chain. So I'll be honest, I didn't care about it. I was like, all right, Fat Sal's looks like they're doing well. Good for them. Then I found out the first one was in Westwood. Now that's only been around since 2010. So it doesn't yet like qualify for an episode, but it's on my radar if it's interesting enough. But here's why I bring it up. They have that sandwich that's called like the Fatty Fat Fatster or something like that. And it's $99.99. My son pointed out on the menu. It's $99.99. It's a 13-pound sandwich and only 2 people have finished it. And it's crazy because it has like 5 cheeseburgers, 10 chicken fingers, like 10 mozzarella sticks, 2 pounds of chili, 2 pounds of marinara sauce, a whole basket of fries like on the sandwich. So that's what your 13 Tommy's burger sort of reminds me of. Because, of course, my son had to see. I was like, has anybody finished it? They're like, yeah, 2 people. Of course, nowadays, everything's on the internet. So we had to, like, watch the video of, like, people eating that. Going back to, like, the Kobayashi hot dog eating contest days where they were doing the dip in water move. Yeah. And I'm like, you're not even enjoying the food at that point. But that's not what it's about. But Tommy's wacky story. I don't know if this qualifies as wacky, but this is dope, there are more Tommy's knockoffs than there are Tommy's. Like there's only 31 or 32 original Tommy's that exist. But man, if you grew up in LA or driving around LA, there's Tommy's, Tommys. There's Tommy's, Tommies, like big Tommy's. There's 67 different knockoff Tommy's, more than there are Tommy's. And you're like, bro, how did you guys not nip this in the bud when it started happening in the 1970s? And basically at first they started to file lawsuits, but they're popping up. It's like whack-a-mole. And then at a certain point they were like, yo, you can't trademark the name Tommy's. So you could trademark and I don't know why I wasn't privy to the legal decision, but they trademarked the original Tommy's or the original Tommy's like hamburger or something like that. And that's what they have to roll with. But I was like, dude, it's crazy because one of my closest friends, he was like, my whole life, I love Tommy's. I was going to Tommy's right next to my house, but it ends up, it's a Tommies, same color scheme, same chili cheeseburgers. Like, it wasn't even real Tommy's. I feel so much. So that was a cool one. I'll give you a wacky. Is the oldest restaurant in LA is called Saugus Cafe, and it's in Saugus, which is in Santa Clarita, just north of Los Angeles proper, but in LA County. That restaurant on its awning says established 1886. So you're like, dude, that's crazy. That's old. But it turns out that it was started as being part of a railroad depot. And that railroad depot wasn't even built until 1887. So maybe not wacky, but the establishment itself doesn't know like the true history. And this is where I kind of come in. You're like, oh, who are you? You some jerk saying you know more than the restaurant. But newspapers of the time are like this great resource. And if you see it in black and white in 1887, like Railroad Depot comes up along with this cafe, like blah, blah, blah. And you're like, dude, it's funny because these guys have been hollering like on their awning and like the story they tell. And you're like, well, maybe it's not exactly like that. So I always think those kind of things are funny.
Just to be fair, 1886, they didn't have the internet, so they couldn't have, or even 1890 when they put up the sign, they didn't know about the internet, so they're like, nobody's ever going to check this.
And it changes hands so many often. I'll leave you with, not leave you, but for this topic, I'll give you this one too. You ever heard of the store Smart and Final? It's like a big box grocery store.
The grocery store, yeah.
Yeah, not quite Costco, but big box. Yeah, I just thought it was cool. They were one of the first grocery stores in LA, by the way, which is significant. But I thought it was cool because I think the name Smart and Final is pretty self-explanatory. Like, oh, it's a good name. It's smart, and it's your final place you're going to shop. Makes sense. End of story. Turns out that the founders, I shit you not, were named Jim Smart and Hildane Final.
No
And
way.
I was like, no way. I was like, come on, that's impossible. And it checks out. And that's like why it's called Smart and Final, not because it was Smart or Final, but because their names were Smart and Final. So I thought that was like,
that's wacky. It'd be like if you told me, if you were like Pizza Hut, not called that. Why do you think it's called Pizza Hut? It's because it was founded by Jim Pizza and Marty Hut.
yes, perfectly said.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're all interesting. They're all fun. Here, I'll just give you one more. You know the sauce Tapatio?
Yeah.
Yeah, hot sauce. They come from LA. Maywood is where they started. They're based in Vernon now, 1971, family recipe. And the family used to like fill the hot sauce bottles themselves with like funnels in these big like vats they'd cook up at home. It's dope. But what I thought was cool is Tapatio's original name was Cuervo, like the tequila. And then they actually generated enough attention and sales by like 1974 that Jose Cuervo bought the rights to the name in California because they were only selling in California at the time. And that's when they changed to Tapatio. So, I mean, like those little tidbits are kind of like what I live for, if you will. And wacky, maybe or maybe not, but fun and interesting. Absolutely. And that's what drives me on these stories.
All fun, all wacky. Question for you: when you go out to lunch with someone, are you resisting the urge to just like be like, oh, they pull out the hot sauce, and you're like, oh yeah, about that hot sauce, or they bring out the meat, and you're like, oh, well, that farm. Funny story about that farm,
That's a great question. I try to read the room and not be that annoying guy, but it's genuinely like what I'm interested in. And
Yeah.
if there's a lull in conversation, I know something, but that's how I always was, even before LA in the Minute. Like, I always think these things are so interesting. I just want to share. One of my old bosses back in like 2004, he's like, you're an information station. I was like, what does that mean? He's like, you like get information, you give information. Like, that's what you do. And I kind of think again, almost 20 years later, there's a pretty relevant description of what I'm doing. So
yeah, information station. I love it. Well, I am shocked that I asked you for a wacky LA food story and you give me 15, which were all wacky, by the way, but you didn't even mention the Zanku murders.
Now, do you consider murder wacky? That's where I kind of like, look, that is a crazy story. That is, now you said something previously, Pioneer could have been, I want to say you said movie or maybe Netflix special.
HBO series, yeah.
There you go. The Zanku story. And by the way, do you say Zanku or Zankou?
I say Zanku, but I would not bet my life that that's how it's said.
My whole life I said Zankou, and I've been corrected so many times that I think it is Zanku, but I'm terrible with pronunciation. But that has nothing to do with the story. That story, wacky or not, should absolutely be a Netflix series, HBO series, whatever it is. For people that don't know, it was started by the Iskandarian family. They're an Armenian family that had immigrated to Lebanon in the 1960s. And the matriarch, the mom who became the grandma, had this homemade garlic paste and this recipe from her family passed down through generations. And if you've been to Zanku, now I'm confused. Are we saying Zanku or Zankou?
Zanku.
If you've
that
been
garlic
to
sauce. That garlic sauce is the goat. It's goat. It's the goat.
That's what they're known for. And it's this paste. And somehow it's not that sharp garlic. It's just like the pure essence of garlic that doesn't look, it does sit with you. I'll be honest. But like at the same time, it's not that one that you're like, oh, this is like too much garlic. Like maybe somebody else smelling your breath might think so, but you're like, God, this is perfect. I want to slather it on. So she had this amazing garlic sauce. And Beirut, Lebanon was happening and bumping in like a metropolitan city in the 60s. And they started selling these rotisserie chickens with this garlic sauce, and they were selling out every day. And then Lebanon underwent like some, political upheaval. They relocated to Los Angeles. I believe, I'm not sure the actual date, but I know in the early 80s, they were like, yo, we need to open a restaurant. They were doing dry cleaning business. They were trying all these other small businesses. Just nothing was saying. They're like, why don't we do what we did? Let's open a restaurant.
So there are two main sons, Vargas and Medeiros. And Medeiros is the one that's like pushing for the restaurant. The other ones kind of wanted to disassociate. They're like, no, we're in America now. We're not going to be in that profession, like blah, blah. Medeiros is like, no, we're doing it. So they opened the restaurant in East Hollywood. That's the first and the original, still stands. And it's like this
on Sunset.
Grimy shopping center. Through the 80s, it was even grimier, like total cool, like LA, like what the hell, who would think this place would be awesome, right? And it takes off and it does well. And Medeiros wants to expand. He's like, let's open more, let's open more, let's open more. And the mom, who was the one actually making the garlic paste, by this point, she's in her like 70s. She's like, dude, I can only do so much of this. And it was a family recipe, new country, old country. She didn't really want to like give other people a recipe. So she's like, I need to make this garlic sauce. Nobody else is touching the recipe. I'm not telling anybody. So they were capped basically by that. And then finally, Medeiros just kept pushing. They're like, fine, you know what? Me, the mom, and the sister and the other brother are going to stay in this location, run this location. You can expand, but you have a different lineage of Zankou, right? And so Medeiros was the hungry one, and he copied the recipe as best as he could and expanded. They had 9 locations, right? But this caused a family schism. And then at this point, what ended up happening is, so they were like, Medeiros, you can expand, but we are keeping this original location. And if you choose to expand, you have nothing to do with this original one. You could take the name, take the logo, take the rest of the recipes as best you can, but those are yours. This one's ours. So it was kind of like a test of the family bonds. And what ended up happening is there became a schism in the family, right? The mother and sister stayed at the East LA location. And then when the mom got sick, she moved in with the daughter, not with the son, which was a tradition in the Armenian culture. So that deepened the schism. And now there's 2 sides of the family. And meanwhile, Zankou is expanding like crazy. It's getting this reputation. Jonathan Gold is writing about it, calling it like the best chicken in Los Angeles. And they're really like 2 separate lines of Zankou. Do you go to this one? Oh, that's not a real one. Oh yeah, well, this one's better, like that kind of stuff. And then in 2003, there was an argument. Medeiros, the son who had expanded, went to his mom's house, who was living with his sister, went to the mom's sister's house, and there was an argument. Killed his mom, killed his sister, killed himself.
Oh,
right? With no plans for what's to happen to the restaurant, no plans to what's to happen to the chain. Talk about like decimating a family. And now it turns out he was in late stage colon and brain cancer. Nobody witnessed why he killed them. They do know there's like evidence because obviously went to trial and stuff like that. They pieced together, he had called a meeting. It was probably premeditated, but again, this is a murder. I mean, it's a double homicide, suicide. So it's a big issue. And then rumors started coming out that Pepsi offered $30 million for the Zankou chain and trademark. So was this an issue of greed? Were secrets being kept? People didn't want to share that money. So it was never really figured out what was going on. But in the subsequent years, there's been court cases. The trademark ended up lapsing. The judge ruled that it belonged to both sides. So both sides could continue to operate as Zankou, even though now they are still different. And if you go to the website, it doesn't list all the locations. Like
no
there's
way.
there's 16 locations, but it'll be like there's only 12, but there's 16 because they each consider the other to be like a fake side of the location. So there's even a wrongful death lawsuit. The suit was dismissed, but it's 2 separately operating businesses. And that all stemmed from a murder suicide with the founders. And it's funny, if you know Zankou, you're like, why aren't there 1,000 locations? Why isn't this coast to coast? Dave's Hot Chicken has 100 locations in 6 years, and they're going to have 500 at the end of next year. Dude, Zankou is like this amazing chicken, the wraps, the kebab, the garlic paste, but it's like, there you go, because they can't figure out like the family business. So I don't know if that's like wacky, but that is definitely like crazy story and like a fun, not fun, that's a bad word too, but very interesting, like food culture, like inside baseball, Los Angeles story.
It's a noir. But it's definitely, it has now got me questioning which Zankous have I even been to? I've been to the Westwood one, been to the East Hollywood one, and my local one is the Glendale one. And I don't even know if they all belong to the same person. I'm gonna have to do my research.
People swear by, look, I'll be honest, everyone I've been to is like pretty damn good. So I'm not picking sides in it. But my hometown one is the one in Van Nuys, but going to that East Hollywood one is special. And I feel like both of those are like legit.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's where I stand on that.
Fascinating. Yeah. Total HBO series if I've ever heard one. So, okay, Zanku should be all over the country, but there are plenty of Los Angeles brands that are all over the country. I mean, you've already mentioned a bunch. Taco Bell, there's McDonald's. There's other ones that we don't think that I didn't know until I was looking at your food channel, like the Cheesecake Factory, Baskin Robbins. My question for you isn't so much which one of these is your favorite, but what do you think makes LA such a prolific purveyor of these types of brands?
It's pretty simple when you think about it. And I always come back to this for almost everything that makes LA, this is part of it, is car culture. Is Los
Mm,
Angeles was the first metropolis to be built after the advent of the automobile. And when you think about cars and driving and exploring, that was the impetus for drive-throughs, right? And drive-throughs were the first like real big well, that's not true. They weren't the first big restaurant chains, but they're the most nimble and easy to duplicate restaurant chains. So everybody in their cars, like food eating became an on-the-go thing for this on-the-go culture that was embracing the car. And I think that a lot of these brands developed and became big because with the car, and then you're going to a different city, you're going to a different town, you still have your cup or your wrapper in your car, and people are like, what is that or something? But it was just easy to get people accustomed to these places. You see it off the freeway, and I think it's like car culture that made these brands stick in people's heads, made them recognizable, and familiarity. People enjoy that, so they're like, oh, there's a McDonald's, there's a Taco Bell, there's a Panda Express, or like you said, Baskin Robbins, Orange Julius, like again, Fatburger, all these places come from LA. And whether or
mhm.
not it's because of like the drive through, I feel like the car culture is what enabled it to like spread and just be so ubiquitous, all these LA places. And because LA at the end of the day, look, we do and have defined pop culture for so long. So many
Yeah.
shows take place here and so many movies and blah blah blah. So even in the background, you see like these LA places, and you're like, oh, why do I know that? Oh yeah, I was in that movie or was in that show. So it makes it easier for that place to expand into a different new location.
That is such a good point. I was so shocked when I first came here that not everybody was eating chili cheese fries on the side of the road because, like, based on pop culture, I was like, yeah, that's the only thing they eat there, and they maintain their like perfect bodies. It's just like it only in California.
Well said. Well said.
Well, I'm gonna put you on the spot for a moment, but fascinating statement that so many things in Los Angeles are due to the car culture. What's another thing that's due to the car culture that we might not think of?
Whew, well, smog, first of all. The reason
Yeah.
why Los Angeles is inextricably linked with smog is because of our dependency on the car. Freeways, which made LA, car culture is the reason why LA is so damn spread out. San Pedro to Silmar, San Bernardino, or forget, let's call it like the the San Gabriel Valley to Pacific Palisades. I mean, again, because you didn't need to set cities up in this close proximity. The whole model for building a city was like, shoot, you could drive. You're going to have freeway access wherever you go. So we could just keep buying land and real estate and expanding further and further. So, I mean, car culture has really defined LA. I'll even go a step further and say the reason why, and I used to think of this back in like the 90s and 2000s, there was like a West Coast hip hop and an East Coast hip hop, which were
Hmm.
very different. And if you listen to them even in retrospect, they're very different musically. It's because on the East Coast, people were listening in headphones. On the West Coast, it was for your car, and you had to have that bass and that bump. And that determined, like, why, in my opinion, why the music developed differently is because the people's listening experience was different. Like on the East Coast, more about like lyrics and like you could be more nuanced and kind of intertwined with your rap flow. But on the West Coast, it was just like, boom, who's got the biggest bass and the low riders and like all that kind of car culture out here. Again, hot rod culture, low rider culture, like those are real things, big things, classic cars to this day. Bob's Big Boy, another place that came from Los Angeles. There used to be 1,000 Big Boy restaurants in the United States. Now there's only 4 Bob's Big Boys left, but one of them has car shows every Friday. Jay
Yeah.
Leno rolls. You got all these classic cars, and like that's a direct response to car culture. So yeah, like the East Coast, West Coast hip hop schism, I feel like was exacerbated by the car as well. So I mean,
That's
it affects a lot
fascinating.
of things. Yeah.
The hip hop thing literally just blew my mind. Have you heard that elsewhere? You should patent that if not.
No, when I was in college, I took a history of hip hop class. Forgot what it was really called, but it was like blah blah blah, like arts and culture 162, like history of hip hop. And the guy I had in there, this guy named Tenok, he's one of my closest friends, used to look at rap with such a cerebral approach. And even though he was from San Diego, he was like an East Coast hip hop guy, like hip hop head. And he used to bring, he's like, these are these observations. So I kind of owe that to him, credit it to him. But I would, if I patent that or get that in public domain, has to be under his umbrella. I want to give credit where credit is due.
It's okay. Co-patent it. That's totally fine. You guys can co-write the book on it.
Can I bring up a mind-blowing story for you?
Yes, please.
I got a good one. I'm going to probably get in trouble for saying this, but it's public on the internet, and it's the first time I put it out there, is the reason why Kogi was a food truck and not a restaurant has to do with Urkel. You know Jaleel White?
Yeah. Did I do that?
Urkel. Did I do that guy? He went to UCLA. He was friends with Roy Choi's business partner in 2006, 2007. Roy Choi wanted to open a new restaurant. He was ready. Obviously, he was ready. And he was going to open a brick and mortar spot. And apparently Jaleel White was like, yo, you see this thing called Twitter? Like, why don't you just open a food truck, put it out on Twitter, let everybody know where you're at. And, let's change the game. So that's in the public domain. I was specifically told not to mention that in my story, but that's something that's like kind of mind blowing to me that I've been sort of waiting to get out there, and you can look that up and verify it. So again, I don't know.
The Urkel detail?
The Urkel detail, that somehow they don't necessarily embrace that association. I don't know what happened afterwards as far as, maybe it's a personal relationship issue. Maybe it was a royalties or business issue or something at that point. But the Kogi, look, it's all Roy Choi, who's one of my heroes and a great guy. And like, dude, that revolutionized not just the food truck industry, made the modern food truck industry and the way we eat. It changed the way people eat for the last 15 years, but it might have just been Jaleel White's brainchild. So
wow, that's fascinating. Do you know this? That's the second time Jaleel White comes up on this podcast. The first time it was because I had Kyle Davidson from Dough Daddy, which is an incredible Detroit-style pizza pop-up that started during the pandemic. And what really helped his business take off is that Jaleel White got wind of his home-driven, run out of his apartment, Detroit-style pizza business, hit him up in the DMs, and was like, hey, can I please get some pizza? So sounds like Jaleel White is kind of a food genius, maybe? Is that what we're finding out?
I'll tell you what else is, he used to be a baller, like basketball player at UCLA. We used to always play in like the John Wooden courts and stuff, and that dude could play ball like for real. So, I mean, sometimes people are linked with certain roles that they've played throughout life. He's probably one of them, however it may be, but guess he's multifaceted, let's say, and food happens to be one of those specialties.
Most interesting man in the world, perhaps. Well,
right?
Speaking of most interesting, that's his new moniker. Let's talk food inventions. We've talked about the food brands, but there's a rich history, which I've learned from your TikTok, of food inventions that have like types of food, drinks. There's the Moscow Mule, there's the cheeseburger, there's the hot fudge sundae. Here's one I can ask you. What's your favorite story in terms of inventions?
I think that they're all like good stories, right? I think one that kind of is like, wait, what? That doesn't make sense. Is the invention of the cheeseburger. You're like, okay, it's simple. Somebody, cheese on a burger. Well, It wasn't invented until 1924 at a place called the Right Spot in Pasadena. And the restaurant's no longer there, but there's a plaque there. And it was like a 17-year-old chef named Lionel Sternberger, not a chef, line cook, 17-year-old. He's like, let me put cheese on a burger and see what happens. He called it the aristocratic burger. They put it on the menu. People loved it. They didn't love the name. So they just said, dude, just call it a cheeseburger. It's not and that's how the cheeseburger was born. And that's pretty simple. But I think maybe from another context, one that's good that was invented in Los Angeles. And by the way, these are all foods invented in Los Angeles. I think the smoothie is a pretty good story, especially because of how ubiquitous smoothies are, and Erewhon and their $25 smoothie and all this kind of stuff. You're like, dude, just throw some fruit in a blender, some milk, your preferred milk, and like call it a day. But the smoothie was invented by a man named Julius Freed. Many of you older listeners may know Orange Julius. Right now it's incorporated. I want to say it's part of Dairy Queen now. Not Dairy Queen. It is Dairy Queen, right?
I think it's Dairy Queen. When you go to Dairy Queen, you see Orange Julius on the menu. Yeah.
Orange Julius in its own right used to be freestanding, and there was and there still is one in the Glendale Galleria, if I'm not mistaken. No, or is that part of a Dairy Queen? Anyway, used to be freestanding. They used to have all these oranges and stuff, and like it was so good. That was the original smoothie. The man named Julius Freed, who was the founder of Orange Julius, invented it because, again, we get back to the 1920s. Julius Freed had an orange stand. He used to sell oranges and fresh squeezed orange juice downtown. And he had a friend named Bill who had a sensitive stomach. And I don't know if you ever had a stomach ache. Orange juice is terrible when your stomach hurts. But he knew oranges had this nutrition, and there was this orange empire, and the gold rush for LA was oranges. That people are pushing oranges. They're so healthy. They're so healthy. So he's like, yo, I need to get orange juice without the acidity. So Julius Freed started adding different ingredients to make it less acidic and more frothy. And the guy, Bill, was like, dude, this is awesome. And they'd say, give me an orange, Julius. And he meant like an orange shake or an orange smoothie. And that essentially is how the smoothie was born. So I kind of like that one.
That's fascinating. Give me an orange Julius. I love that. The cheeseburger one is interesting too. The first question that came to my mind when you said that is, did they have weed in the 1920s? Because that sounds like a stoner line cook.
Dude, great question. That's right. I just put cheese on it.
Exactly.
I'll tell you one more, and the story is not crazy, but the California roll invented in LA, I think is pretty dope. Place called Tokyo Kaikan in the 1960s. In Little Tokyo, the chef needed a substitute for bluefin tuna because, again, you couldn't get any fish anytime you wanted back then. And the fattiness of avocado, the seafood flavor of crab. He's like, this is as close as we're going to get to bluefin. Cut them all up, rolled it up, and that was where the California roll was born. So I think that's pretty cool that comes out of LA also.
Yeah, California roll gets a lot of shit, but it's iconic, let's be honest. And I always include it in a sushi order because, you know, it's the one that's like, it's the filler, but you need it. You need it. You need a California roll.
Here's why I like the California roll. It's a bridge to real sushi for people who, quote unquote, don't like sushi. Because I feel like almost everybody, once they really have sushi, is like, oh, sushi. I know so many like sushi converts are like, I can't eat raw fish. You know, not so many these days because people know. But again, in an era where like raw fish was weird to certain people, the California roll is how you kind of like get them into sushi. So I kind of think that that's like the purpose. And like you said, it's filler and it's good. You throw me some California rolls, I'm crushing them.
Yeah, it's the gateway drug. I think that's a great point. That's a great point.
Good way to
put it. So you said earlier in this podcast, I'm not a food guy, but you know more about food than like, you know, most people, I think, especially when it comes to the history of food, the history of LA food. I'm curious, where do you think LA stands in the conversation of greatest food cities in the world? Let's say you had to make the case that LA is the greatest food city in the world. What would you say?
Think about this a lot, man. I think about this a whole lot. And I want to be clear. I'm not like this gourmand. I can't taste something and be like, that's too much basil. You know, I don't have that kind of palate. My wife does, by the way, which is sensational. I just love eating and I love the history of food. However, I've always been hyper conscious. I love the experience. I love supporting LA places. And I've always been hyper conscious of how LA fits into the world's like list of great food cities. And it used to piss me off that there was no Michelin guide in LA because they thought, oh, LA doesn't qualify as a good enough food city. And the list, it was always like New York and San Francisco. Like, don't get me wrong, New York's amazing. San Francisco has good food. But, bro, it goes back to Jonathan Gold, and his book, Counterintelligence from 2001, is must-read reading for anybody who loves LA and anybody who loves food. And it defines why Los Angeles is so important as a food city. And it's not even a narrative book. All it is like 300 reviews that Jonathan Gold wrote. But what you discover when you're reading this book is the culture and the breadth of foods from different countries and cultures that we have in Los Angeles. Because you got to remember, I just did an episode on diversity in Los Angeles. There are 224 languages spoken in Los Angeles. Residents in LA represent 140 countries on the globe. And most of those countries have different regional types of food and cuisine. Well, guess what? There's almost that many countries represented in types of restaurants in Los Angeles. So it's like this. My wife just sent me a picture of a Polish restaurant. I'm never eaten Polish, but I can tell you where Jamaican is. Obviously, you know where Korean barbecue, Mexican, sushi, like you name the culture and the country, there's a restaurant from that place. And because they're from transplants or immigrants and people who are pining for their homeland and want to represent like the authentic food, you don't get that breadth of experience. And again, you're like, oh, New York, there's so many different people. Well, look, Los Angeles is the most diverse city on the planet. And that is objectively a fact. The food is a mirror to that and it represents that. And I think like maybe you have more Michelin star restaurants somewhere else. Maybe the concentration of French restaurant, blah, 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 and fine dining is better somewhere else. But bro, you're going to tell me where you're going to get some like street tacos followed by some like awesome kebab, followed by, again, Korean barbecue. And these are just like some of my favorite Thai food, like jitlada. It's like you don't get that breadth and variety without having to go to these fancy places all the time. And I think that that's why LA has to be in, if not near the top of all food cities in the United States.
Not to mention, in the world. And not to mention, we've got a garlic sauce at an Armenian restaurant that's literally to die for.
Yes.
Well, look, forget history and big picture for one moment. If I'm asking Evan to lunch, where's he taking me?
It depends where we are in the city, dude. That's a great question. Look, my favorite restaurant is Jitlada, Thai place with the spicy level that they've mastered. Like what I love about it is it's spicy enough where you are definitely attentive to it, but you got to keep eating it. Like it's not that kind of like, it's not like the hot lunch challenge or anything like that, where it's like somehow, and obviously it's delicious. Lunch, sushi. Let's go somewhere in Sushi Row in Studio City, the largest concentration of sushi restaurants outside of Japan. All of these guys go to the fish markets, master chefs. There are only 6 sushi chefs in Los Angeles. 3 of them are in Studio City on Sushi Row. You can't throw a rock without hitting an awesome sushi place. So lunch, let's go get some sushi. Dinner, let's get Jitlada. Breakfast, got to get tacos, street tacos somewhere. A question that comes up a lot is like, what's your favorite taco? Honestly, it's whichever one I'm eating at the time. We are so blessed in Los Angeles because there's so many good taco places. LA Taco has their Taco Madness, which is like an NCAA bracket style countdown of 64 taco restaurants. How many places in the world have 64 of any type of restaurant that are good enough to like compete in this like tournament? So like you got to get tacos, you got to get sushi. I'm getting Thai food. Again, I keep bringing up Korean barbecue, fried chicken. I go to Pioneer for sure. I got to take you to Pioneer.
I got to go to Pioneer.
Yeah, that's the place. It's one of my and you know what else? You want to go to dinner. It's not necessarily for the food, but maybe my favorite restaurant is Musso and Frank. It's been around over 100 years. It's in Hollywood. It seems schmaltzy and corny. The servers dress up in these like 3-piece tuxes. But man, when you're inside there, it genuinely feels like you are transported back in time to an earlier LA, and just the feeling in there is like so special. Their martinis come with a sidecar, so you're getting like a double martini every time you get a martini. That's a great place to go. But I mean, just eat and experience. And every community in LA has great places to eat. You're in Palms, you're in Silmar, you're in Montebello. There's gonna be somewhere dope to eat, man. Like that's the cool thing about Los Angeles.
It's true, man. It's true. Beautifully said. Are there any final thoughts you want to leave our listeners with?
I want to iterate that Los Angeles is also like the grocery store capital of the world. This is something that just for me, I kind of love. Vallarta, Gelson's, Vaughn's, Ralph's, Trader Joe's, 99 Ranch, John's, all come from Los Angeles. Part of that is because we are still in like the greatest agricultural producing area in the United States, close to in the world. And they get all this good produce, and that just enables like these grocery stores to thrive. And like, we are very lucky that we can get all these fruit and vegetables 12 months a year. And one other thing is, remember the American dream. That's what LA is about. And it's told through the food stories, whether it's Fat Burger, which was started by Lovey Yancey in the 1940s, a black female that somehow launched $1 billion business in a racist time from her bootstraps. You talk about Portos, Cuban immigrants that now have what is the #1 bakery in the United States, not just Cuban bakery, but they started this literal movement. I didn't know Cubans were known for these, like, and that comes from Fidel Castro's Cuba, for goodness sake. And now they're making it in Los Angeles. And then my personal favorite story is King Taco. Raul Martinez, 1974, immigrant from Mexico City, gets to Tijuana, didn't even have the fare to cross the border. Somebody was overhearing him talk with his wife, paid for their bus fare. He ends up landing in MacArthur Park, goes to watch soccer games as people do on the weekends. He's grilling up some carne asada. People hear the grill. Yo, dude, can I get some carne asada? He starts the next week, light bulb goes off. He starts selling the carne asada and little tacos, sells out all the soccer players, all the families for the soccer players. He has this crazy idea. He's going to buy an ice cream truck and start selling tacos out of this ice cream truck. This is 1974. He posts up in front of a bar late night, sells all of his tacos, sells out, makes like $120, which in 1974 overnight's a good number. Twice as much the next day. It was so popular within 6 months. He had his first brick and mortar, and now King Taco. That's what revolutionized the food truck industry. Roy Choi took it to a completely different and new level, but that was first like taco truck as we know it in LA, and that's so important. And that's the American dream. And those are the stories that make LA so awesome. My wife's family has a place called Tio's in the Inland Empire. There's 6 locations. They're immigrants from Huanuco, Zacatecas, a city of 1,200 people. They came over. My wife's mom was from a place called Guatemala, not the country Guatemala. It was a city called Guatemala that had like 100 people. Didn't even have running water, electricity until 1974. And yet now she comes to America. They start with one tiny restaurant, Van Nuys, called Mexicana. That ends up turning with the Tios, the uncles, into 6 different locations in the Inland Empire. Successful family, American dream, started in LA. And there are so many of those stories. And that's what also adds to just the richness and the flavor, no pun intended, of Los Angeles food.
It's true, man. It's the American dream. It's a beautiful thing that we have here. And it's cool to hear all these stories of the places that have made it, because there are so many places that we drive by or visit every day that are in these early stages. And it's awesome to think where they could be one day. And it's because that opportunity exists here, you know?
Yeah, absolutely true, man. That's, again, LA is the land of the American dream. I mean, I love it. And it's told through food. Tell so many stories through food and bridge so many cultures. Everybody loves it. And that's why you're here. And that's why you have this show, man.
Evan, you're an absolute delight. Where can people find you if they're looking for you?
Go find me, LA in a Minute, on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, and check out the podcast In a Minute with Evan Lovett, wherever you get your podcast, man. Spotify, Apple, the Odyssey app. Got to give a shout out to Odyssey. They own K-Earth, K-Rock, and KNX. They're the ones who make that show possible. So I'm very appreciative of them. But yeah, check it all out. If you love LA, you love history, you love food, you love facts, LA in a Minute.
Do it. Listen to it. And you're going to have to take me out for that day of food, because honestly, I'm hungry as fuck right now, and it's your fault.
Yes, me too, man. Me do it.
All right, Ed. Thank you so much.
Later, buddy. Thank you, Luca.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the LA Food Podcast. Thanks to Evan Lovett. What a guy, what a guest. I really hope you go follow his Instagram and TikTok, because I don't know about you, but I learned a heck of a lot today. If you liked what you heard today, please go to wherever you listen to podcasts, leave us a rating, a review, subscribe if you should be so inclined. And if you're looking for me, you can find me on TikTok and Instagram at the LA Countdown. That's TheLaCounTDOWN.